SEC has approved Bitcoin ETFs. I believe more than just, I think it's crypto market ETFs. And there's a lot of people who are concerned about it, a lot of people cheering it on. But this brings us to the acceptance of the U.S. government as it pertains to crypto and the fear that they're going to push central bank digital currency, also known as CBDC. Could you explain to people what that is and your position on CBDC?
Sure. And so let's just take decentralized options in the blockchain, like Bitcoin or otherwise. Put that to one side. I think greater decentralization at least as an option that's available to hold the dollar to its feet as an alternative to opt out from that system is a good thing.
Well, let me pause you real quick, though.
Yep.
Sorry, there's probably a lot of people who don't know what central bank digital currency even
means. So I was gonna segregate the issue of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency away from the central bank digital currency, which the easiest way to think about this would be turning your dollar into effectively a digital asset that's centrally monitorable. We could use, talk about which way they would use the blockchain or not, it doesn't matter. The simple way to think about it is take the cash in your pocket and convert that into the equivalent of like tokens you'd get in a digital video game. And they can either up or down the number of points you have, which are dollars in your bank account, not based on what you deposit or take in or take out, but based on whatever the government actually decides is the criteria for increasing or decreasing what's in your bank account. Indeed, they're doing this in China. In fact, that's one of the principal arguments for bringing it to the United States, is that China is adopting a digital yuan, has an equivalent of a central bank digital currency in China. Now, we have to ask ourselves, why is China doing it? The general argument in the UK, which is moving in this direction, and the US, which is taking the earliest of steps to move in this direction through the so-called FedNow program. The argument is we have to keep up technologically with China, keep up with the Joneses or keep up with the Jinpings, as the case may be here, right? You have to ask yourself, why is China doing it? They want to actually be able to exert monitoring and control and discipline of their own citizens. It's the ultimate manifestation of a social credit system. So that's what this is about in China. Now, there's a version of this. It wasn't exactly through a central bank digital currency per se, but to at least understand the impact it could have on your life, look at what they did to the Canadian truckers. They cut off access to their bank accounts. They cut off access to their Canadian dollars when they took a position against vaccine mandates and a position against lockdowns that they couldn't address through any means other than through using the weaponization of the financial system to do it. So if we bring that central bank digital currency to the United States, it offers another tool for what would be otherwise a tyrannical permanent government to be able to more effectively implement its will. To be clear, and some people fall into this trap of thinking that just because we eliminate the tool, we've eliminated the intention. No, the intention still exists. But that doesn't mean that you still give them the same tool that would allow them to more quickly implement what they already are looking to in other ways.
I'd like to elaborate on why this would be so nightmarish. Several years, we're talking 8 or so years ago, 10 years ago, we started seeing the rise of social media censorship. If you tweeted something that was against the popular narrative, you'd get suspended. Many of us were called conspiracy theorists for arguing what was actually happening. In fact, it was reported by, I believe it was Gizmodo first in May of 2016, that Facebook had staff removing conservative news outlets from their trending tab. That's just your ability to speak. I know, one of the more serious things to be able to lose, to not be able to engage in the public sphere. Imagine the same scale of censorship, but in terms of you buying milk, bread, and eggs.
Yes.
One day you wake up and you go to the grocery store and you're using your app, because that's what the central bank digital currency will be forced to be on your phone, and you'll walk up, you'll put your milk on the self-checkout because there's no humans anymore. You'll scan your phone and it'll say, you have been banned from purchasing for 24 hours due to hate speech.
Or docked a certain number of dollars.
But by the way, just going back to just bringing up COVID and the things that we saw throughout COVID, that was one of my major concerns that I spoke about. Just the digitization of everything that was happening at that time. Suddenly, like, they were trying to say your menus could potentially have COVID. They kept saying that dollar bills, do you remember this in the news?
Oh, yeah.
Dollar bills could spread COVID, and suddenly they didn't want any more dollar bills. We're no longer accepting cash. So many restaurants, grocery stores, no longer accepting cash because you could potentially spread COVID, which was an absurdity in my mind, an absolute absurdity. But a lot of these things are now long lasting, right? In terms of the fact that there's not that many human beings. I don't know if that's the same where you live, but not that many human beings at the grocery store anymore. They kept up the things after COVID they said were just for COVID. And I felt that it was very much because they did want us to move in this direction as a society.
Well, you can see it in Las Vegas.
Potentially to prep us for this.
And I just want to play that one step forward to tie earlier to one of an increasingly what looks like a Republican policy. of, at least certainly of a certain candidate, of tying your government-issued ID to your internet account or your social media account. So now combine that with the central bank digital currency. Now you don't have to tie it just milk in the grocery store. Every time you hit like on a tweet that does not match the regime's approved narrative, we could dock you 50 cents. If you hit retweet, you actually dock you $1. And so Jack Smith, I just want to tie this together, right? Right now in the subpoena for one of the federal cases against Donald Trump, there's so many of them you lose track, but it's one of the Jack Smith federal prosecutions. In that subpoena, I think it's worth people understanding. It certainly affects people who are watching us right now. Might affect some of us in this room, maybe some of us at this table. I don't know. Not me, because I wasn't using Twitter back then. But if you retweeted or liked one of Donald Trump's posts in that year, that's now the subject of Jack Smith's subpoena. Wow. So let's play that forward. That your username or whatever has already been the subject of that subpoena. Now say that that handle was tied to your government-issued ID, which is also tied to your digital dollar. He can't convict you in court necessarily. But why don't we give him a nice little spanking? Take a few dollars out of their bank account. That's literally where this vision of the so-called Great Reset, that's where this lands.
That would be a coup. That would be something, that would be an attempted coup by global enforcement powers that we cannot allow to happen.
They can already freeze your bank accounts when you're under investigation, say you worked for a company, and then all of a sudden one day you can't buy things. But with the central bank digital currency, it goes so far beyond that. We're going
Social
into the
credit system.
But it's automated.
Yeah.
It's to where it won't even be a judge saying, I think there's probable cause to freeze his account. It's going to be a machine saying, your account is frozen. And good luck. Imagine having to go to the DMV every time you needed to get your bank unbanned.
And this is tell me if this is like too abstract and we can sort of bring it back, but it's a pattern that repeats itself in so many different places where right now, you're right, they can freeze your bank account even as it exists today. But it takes something that requires the government to take a quantum step, right? You have to have a preponderance of evidence that's 50.1 to percent chance of actually having done it. And then to actually convict somebody, you have to be beyond a reasonable doubt. That's 99.999%, 100% certainty. So you have to take these quantum steps of certainty. What the central bank digital currency does is it takes this system that ties a quantum level of certainty and just makes it continuously varying. Right? So it's not like Jack Smith is going to say that he's going to wipe out your entire bank account and freeze your entire bank account. The way this would work is I'm just going to dock you by 50 cents. Like, I think that's actually the thing to see is it wouldn't be, if we were using the analogy, Tim, I think it would be less that we're not going to allow you to buy the milk at all. It's going to be that instead of having $100, you now have 99. So it's designed to change behaviors at the margin. And that's really where this is different from the current status quo, where they technically could also freeze your bank account entirely, couldn't buy any milk. It's not that. It's that you like to post we didn't quite like. We see that because of your government-issued ID tied to your social media profile. It's not like we need to go to the court system for that. It's not like you've done something criminal. But we're just going to dock you a little bit with a little so-called nudge in the right direction. That's actually what's actually far more frightening with the CBDC.
There's so much more here, too, we can't even begin to imagine. How about geo-locking transactions? Meaning, let's say there is a political rally happening in D.C., and the president says, we're going to have a rally. So then anybody who attends that rally, their ability to transact is shut off within 50 miles and just these individuals. All of a sudden, you can't buy train tickets, you can't buy milk, you can't buy pizza, you can't go to McDonald's to buy food.
And for anybody who thinks that's a ridiculous example, I believe it's Bank of America that handed over records for anybody who was in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 to Jack Smith, which is exactly not that far from what you're describing today. So, but I think it's worth, I think for the people, there's a lot of people in New Hampshire that fit this category when I'm campaigning there who come up and ask, like, this will be the first question they ask at a town hall is like, tell me about your position on CBDC. I share why I think it's a risk, but I think it's important not to fall in the trap of thinking just because we've stopped that, you still have a government that can do a lot of these things to you. It's just that it becomes a lot easier for the government to do these things to you when they can do it in small increments rather than Bank of America having to hand it over to a prosecutor who needed to go through probable cause. A lot of this can just be done much more easily. So even as we put the kibosh on the CBDC, and I will, and that's easy, it's just simple executive action. This is never going to happen in the United States. I'll get that done in January of 2025. A year from now, we're good. It's still just, it's like a water balloon. It's like a hydraulic pump system. You squeeze it here, it's going to show up somewhere else. And so we're always kind of one step behind. And the reason people don't pay attention, ESG, CBDC, whatever, is the more you acronymize it, the more boring you make it, the less likely you are to the people are to pay attention to it.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.